So obviously, in this kind of events, innovation is gets a big focus for game developers. Here we are with Corey King from Zenfry, which is who's defined like a dynamic creative force.
That's what. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I'm the chief executive artist of Zenfry. We're a Winnipeg-based creative arts and entertainment company. We do films, books, we've had gallery art, but our focus here at Gamelab and our biggest project that we've ever undertaken is Clandestine Anomaly, which is a geolocative augmented reality game. The first of its kind in the world, and as everyone keeps telling me, they keep saying it's very ambitious, and so now everyone's starting to scare me with the level of ambition, but we're just looking to create an awesome experience out in the world.
So from all those fields you mentioned, you mix together in a company like Zenfry. How do you mix them together?
How do we mix them together? I don't know. We just do it. I mean, really, we're artists, and we just go where the story takes us. We don't really think in boundaries. We don't go, oh no, it's a game, let's not do it. Obviously, it was a little harder to get into it. It took a few more years to get into it because I had no experience. But yeah, I mean, we're just really led by what we're passionate about, and when this idea came to my head, I became passionate enough that I would learn the industry, I would make the connections I needed, I would find the funding and get it off the ground. I mean, as we grow, it gets a little bit more difficult because who do you hire? Do you hire somebody who knows how to edit a film, or do you hire a game programmer? But I mean, we basically try to keep it as a small creative team, and then contract out or have project-specific teams in order to enable us to be so broad, but still have the flexibility to go where we need to.
And maybe your main thing, aside all those fields, is storytelling.
Storytelling is basically what we do, I would say. I'd say we're storytellers, and we go where the story takes us. So some stories are better as books. As you've seen, there's some books that get turned into movies and they're terrible because they're better as books. And there's some things that are better told as movies. And in the case of this game, there's really no game that is like it, but I had the idea for the story, and I didn't even understand what augmented reality was, which like I didn't have any conception of the technology. I just was like, this phone seems like it could do this, and you know, here's the story I want to tell, and then just drive towards making that story. Absolutely, I think that that's what unites all those different strands is a focus on storytelling.
So on that game, it's an augmented reality game. It's ambitious, or looks ambitious, and how do you tell a story via an augmented reality game?
Well, I actually did a talk about this at the Augmented World Expo in Santa Clara. They invited me down to do a talk on it because essentially nobody has figured out how to tell a story this way. There literally is, there might be some like light story elements in some of these games, like, you know, like Angry Birds, where it's like a very light story, but it's not really a story. Essentially, we are generating and learning how to tell the story as we go. Some of it just came from just assumptions that we had just by, you know, what, for a story to be good enough in augmented reality that's geolocative, it has to be compelling enough that I'm going to walk there and it's going to be worth my while. There's certain principles that we've come to, like, you know, reality has to be important in this type of story. In other stories, you're transported. In augmented reality, you're transformed. The environment's transformed. So your location has to matter. You can't just say, oh, it's 5 blocks away. It needs to be at a place that has an emotional connection. You, the player, aren't a character. You are really you. And so you have to learn to tell a story in a way that you're not Sam Shepard, hero of Mass Effect with this great backstory. You need to be anybody, and that creates some challenges. I mean, I hope I could say that we've come up with the right solution, and then once people play the game, because a lot of the tricks to how to make this compelling are things that we don't want to spoil, but we hope we did it right. But certainly, I think what gives us the edge where other people maybe have failed is that we're not technology focused, and we've already had experience telling stories in different mediums, so we kind of naturally have this tendency to be able to apply principles based on what is necessary. That's just kind of inherent. If you only work in games, you might not see from an outside perspective what would be required because you're so used to that one medium.
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit difficult to understand. Can you give us an example of maybe a sequence on the game? Not giving too much away, no spoilers, but how can you tell that the story, and what do you do with the things of the environment and with your mobile device?
Well, one of the very first things that happens in the game is, again, we have to set the stage where you're not involved in the story. Every story starts with a moment before the story starts to trigger the events. And we start with that, where you actually play an 8-bit game. And as you're playing the 8-bit game, an alien ship nearby is crashing down, and it needs your help. It's tried to call everybody else. It hasn't worked, because you wouldn't be the first guy they would go to, because you're not even supposed to know about this thing. Yeah. And then they just hack all the phones in your area, and your phone happens to be one of the ones that's hacked. And that just starts with, you could be anywhere playing this game, and it hacks. But what happens is it goes, we need a crash site. We need a park or an open field. Your map pops open. You tell it where to go, what park or field to go to, and, you might be able to see it crash, but definitely it crashes. And if you go to that location, the ship is there. And we think that's important, for one, because it cares about your environment, and two, that's something that is, if an alien ship crashed, that would be something that would be worth going to see, and having a story that teleports you in that way. And after that point, after that initial point, it's about creating the emotional relationship. So you end up with a probe that will follow you around in the game, becomes your friend who guides you through the story. And that both opens up the world to you, helps explain the world, but gives you something emotional to connect to, so that, if it gets in danger, you feel struggle. Because unlike other games, we can't kill the player, because you're really you.
No, please.
Technology's not that good. And I don't know that anyone would want to play that game. So we find other ways emotionally to have the sort of same kind of costs that you would have in another game through the characters you're connected to.
Which is the current status on Clandestine?
Sure. We just finished pre-production, so we have a prototype built that sort of proves the technology. We have the core art assets created. We've designed a lot of the characters. We have a complete game design document, technical design document. We basically have all the pieces ready to go. We have our plan, and we're about to go into production. And then there's going to be about a year of development work to get us to finish to production, and we hope to launch it next spring, depending on how funding works out.
Which platforms?
iOS definitely is likely to be the first platform, followed by Android, and depends on who we talk to. I mean, we have some interesting options and opportunities from, certain exclusivity or timed exclusivity, which might change the plan, but iOS, Android definitely first, and then we'll sort of permeate out to the Windows phones and the BlackBerries.
And maybe also consoles, because we have some augmented reality games, cool games in the PS Vita, 3DS, maybe even the Wii U with the gamepad.
Yeah, PS Vita is one that we're very interested in doing. There's certain problems with the Vita that we're willing to overcome, but it makes it hard to do it first without adequate funding. Primarily, it's the fact that not everyone who owns a Vita, it's less likely that they're going to have anything but Wi-Fi. And while you can play the game with just Wi-Fi, you don't want to say that the core experience of the game is only accessible to a very small population of the people. So Vita is definitely an option. The console, the home consoles, we have plans for a different experience that ties into the core game if we're successful, where we'll expand into consoles. The core game is about your world becoming the game. Doesn't really work on your couch.
It's not like the alien ship is gonna crash on
into your house. It's about your neighborhood. But I mean, we definitely do have plans for the IP that link into that outdoor experience that would be a console experience.
Okay. And getting back to the AR technology, you mentioned that you really didn't know much about it before this project, and what have you learned, and how do you think is the current shape of that technology applied to games?
Well, I was fortunate enough, I suppose, to meet some of the top augmented reality developers in my country of Canada, simply by, I just eventually stumbled upon what it was. If it didn't exist, I would have invented it, but it fortunately did exist, which saves me a bit of time, right? I just found people who knew what they're doing. I mean, I have a great technical director in a company called Evident. We're working with another firm called Talking Dog Studios, who also does augmented reality and music. And we don't see augmented reality just as necessarily that traditional, you're putting visuals in it. We also see augmented reality as an audio thing as well. Sounds can be augmented. The environment should be reflected in the sound as well, which is a sort of another experimental territory that we have the benefit of working with a company who works in AR and in music. The current state of the tech, I would say, I call it minimally viable to have this happen. There's certainly a lot more things that we can do with augmented reality, and things that we're working with as well, like figuring out the source of light to adjust it, taking in time and weather data to change the game. The more data we have about an environment, the better augmented reality is. Currently, our data sets is like map data, GPS data, accelerometer data, compass data. You can do time and weather, and we're planning to explore that, but it just hasn't been done yet. So currently, it's in its infancy, but we're not really scared of that because we feel like if you create the story with the limitations in mind, you can still create a compelling experience. If you sit there and try to brute force, make the visuals as good as possible, make the technology work and stretch it, I think you'll probably ruin the experience. But we feel it's at a state now where you can tell a compelling experience. And if we get the other thing is if we got our foot in the door later on, if we waited till this was adequately developed, it would be pretty much impossible for a little indie like me to even compete. Getting into it when it's at that early infancy state and having a vision for how to do it is actually what we hope will make us successful, because we can be there to help it grow in the direction that it needs to.
And what about when you have the camera and the screen with you all the time? Like, for example,
Google.
Yeah, Android games on Google glasses.
That is definitely the not the final frontier, but one of the approaching frontiers, which we are extremely interested to get involved in. I don't feel like the consumer level versions of these products, like Google Glass, is adequate yet to tell this experience. But we know it's coming, and when it comes, this is when it's really going to be big. When you don't need that tablet anymore, but I still think you'll use the tablet to control certain things. But when you can just look around anywhere and have the world change to fit the game, that's really what we're waiting for. We're not waiting for it, we're working now, but that's really where we see this going, where you could be standing in front of me dressed in a business suit, but really in the game you're dressed like Mario, and nobody needs to know who's not playing the game. I think that unlocks a whole lot of creative potential where everything just gets kind of crazy. You can be whoever you want, and only the people who want to be like that with you will need to experience it, and to everyone else it's a mystery. I think that is the fantastic future that we have in store, and partly why we want to figure out how to tell story now so that it can be easily applied and a very clear path forward once we get to the state where we are wearing the wearable glasses and things.
Okay, looking forward to Sen Fry's reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm enjoying the show.